Good afternoon, and here's the latest news from across the continent of Africa. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you tuned in and joining us from, and we shall start from Sudan. Former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir was moved from prison to a military hospital before the outbreak of the fighting earlier this month. This is according to the Sudanese army. Bashir came to power in a military coup in 1989 and ruled Sudan until 2019, when he was toppled by another coup after large-scale protest. Following his ousting, he was convicted of corruption and sentenced to 2 years in prison. The army said in a statement that Bashir and a number of others had been moved from the Kober prison near capital Khartoum to a military hospital under police custody on the recommendation of a medical staff. Questions were raised about Bashir's whereabouts after a former minister in his government, Ali Harun, announced on Tuesday that the former president had left the prison with other former officials. Some reports had suggested that Bashir may have been released during an attack on the prison. Both Bashir and Harun are wanted by the International Criminal Court over the alleged atrocities in the western Sudanese region of Darfur. Nearly 1,700 civilians from more than 50 countries fleeing Sudan have arrived in Saudi Arabia in a boat, the Foreign Affairs Ministry has said. The ministry says civilians were transported by one of the kingdom's ships, and it says the kingdom is keen to provide all the basic needs of foreign nationals in preparation for their departure. It is the largest rescue effort by Saudi Arabia so far. Thousands of people have been trying to flee the country during a shaky 3-day ceasefire between rival military factions. And still staying with Sudan, Sudanese and foreigners streamed out of the capital Khartoum and other battle zones as fighting Tuesday shook. A new 3-day truce brokered by the United States and Saudi Arabia. Millions of Sudanese trapped in their homes since violence began on the 15th of April between forces loyal to country's top 2 generals. Civilian life has come to a standstill as tens of thousands of heavily armed fighters from the military and its rival rapid support forces battled it out in densely populated residential areas. Footages captured by the Associated Press in Khartoum showed empty streets and smoke rising on the horizon of the city. Over 420 people, including at least 273 civilians, have been killed and over 3,700 wounded since the fighting began. The military has appeared to have the upper hand in fighting in Khartoum, but the RSF still controls many districts in the capital and the neighboring city of Omdurman and has several large strongholds around the country. A series of short ceasefires the past week have either failed outright or brought on only an intermittent lulls in the fighting that has raged between forces loyal to the 2 top generals since April 15th. The lulls have been enough for dramatic evacuations of hundreds of foreigners by air and by land, which continued on Tuesday. But they have brought no relief to millions of Sudanese caught in the crossfire, struggling for food, shelter and medical care as explosions, gunfire and loot has wrecked their neighborhoods. In a country where a third of the population of the 46 million already needed humanitarian assistance, multiple aid agencies have had to suspend operations and dozens of hospitals have been forced to shut down. The UN Refugee Agency said it was gearing up for potentially tens of thousands of people fleeing into neighboring countries. Calls for negotiations to end the crisis in Africa's third largest nation have been ignored so far. And tens of thousands of people are fleeing Sudan amid a tenuous ceasefire that has brought to lull to the fighting that broke out earlier this month. Many are making extremely dangerous journeys to do so, and by air. Many foreign nationals have been repatriated to their home countries by air, with countries including Germany already having wrapped up the evacuations by Tuesday evening. Among those still getting out are hundreds of UK nationals getting on Royal Air Force evacuations flights, going back and forth between Cyprus and an air base near the Sudanese capital Khartoum. The government has had to cope with a larger cohort of British nationals in Sudan compared to many other countries, Home Secretary Suella Braverman has said. And by sea, countries including India, France and Saudi Arabia have sent naval ships to the coastal city of Port Sudan, from where people are being evacuated across the Red Sea to the Saudi city of Jeddah. The Saudi Foreign Ministry said that a ship carrying 1,687 civilians from more than 50 countries arrived in Jeddah earlier today, the kingdom's largest evacuation effort so far. For many, reaching the port has meant journeys of hundreds of miles by bus through arid desert. They've had to navigate army checkpoints and avoid fighters from the Rapid Support Forces, the paramilitary force on one side of this violent conflict. And of course, by land, huge numbers of Sudanese nationals and foreign citizens too have also been trying to reach safety in the neighboring countries of Chad, Egypt, Ethiopia, and South Sudan via overland route. The United Nations has warned that 250,000 Sudanese could be on the move, but others have chosen to remain in the capital, Khartoum, despite reports of ongoing skirmishes amid the ceasefire. Some who have spoken to the media say that they can hear fighting near their homes, but they feel safer staying indoors because of the robbing, looting, and violence happening on the city streets. Others have said they are desperate to leave but can't afford the cost of the tickets. All right. Now we head over to Ivory Coast. The President of the Republic, the Ivory Coast, Alassane Ouattara, points out to the resilience of the Ivorian economy in the face of crisis due to the difficult international situation and announces a brighter economic prospects in his third State of the Nation address to the members of Parliament and senators at the Sofitel Abidjan Hotel on Tuesday. The head of state stressed that in the face of global inflation, the Ivorian government has taken measures to maintain this upward trend. Also, faced with the rise in the price of wheat because of the Russian-Ukrainian war, Cote d'Ivoire has supported millers to the tune of 62 billion CFA francs, that is equivalent to $100 million, including 2 billion to strengthen the sector. The full 725 billion CFA francs is state subsidized and have been granted to mitigate the impact of international price increases on the cost of transport and goods. And this corresponds to 2% of the Ivorian gross domestic product, the GDP. In addition, the government has adopted a vast program for the agricultural, fisheries, and animal resources sectors to ensure food security in the country. He noted that during the African Union summit held in February in Addis Ababa, the Abidjan Declaration on Nutrition was unanimously welcomed. It is, he recalled, a call to action for food and nutrition security and human capital on the African continent. Despite this difficult situation, Cote d'Ivoire has continued its dynamic development of basic social infrastructure, roads, education, electrification, drinking water supply, health facilities, training of youth, among others. Announcing the continuation of his commitment to modernize the country, Mr. Ouattara announced for 2023 strong actions amounting to 361 billion CFA francs programmed for the benefit of young people, given he dedicated this year to the youth for the period 2023 to 2025. A program valued at 1,118 billion CFA francs is planned for the benefit of more than the 1.5 million young people in the country. And Britain's plan to send migrants to Rwanda is unlawful because of the East African country is not a safe country, lawyers of a group of asylum seekers told the Court of Appeal in London on Monday. Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government want to send thousands of migrants more than 4,000 miles away to Rwanda as part of a $174 million US dollars deal agreed last year. It regards the plan as central to deterring record numbers of asylum seekers arriving in small boats across the channel from France, something Sunak has made one of his 5 priorities amidst facing pressure from some of his own conservative lawmakers and the public to resolve this issue. However, the first planned flight to Rwanda last June was blocked by a last-minute ruling by the European Court of Human Rights, which imposed an injunction preventing any deportations until the conclusion of legal action in Britain. The High Court in London ruled the policy was lawful in December 2022, but that decision is being challenged by asylum seekers from countries including Syria, Sudan, Iraq, Iran, and Vietnam, along with some human rights organizations. And the latest on the DRC in what seems to be a news squabble between it and its neighboring Uganda. A border dispute between Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo is brewing again in the frontier town of Padia in West Nile after DRC locals backed by their country's police crossed into Uganda and laid claim to 3 villages. The villages are all in Zombo district in Uganda. Such incursions by DRC security personnel in Uganda have been a constant cause for concern in parts of the West Nile. They have also become a source of insecurity, which undermines cross-border trade between the two countries. Uganda's area resident district commissioner, Colonel retired P.S. Alitema, told the Monitor that his office has scheduled a meeting with DRC security from Mahagi territory as part of its interim effort to calm the situation. He also revealed that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Kampala has been briefed about the unfolding situation and plans to take up the matter at a higher level. Alitema called for respect of the international boundary, warning that any violation creates insecurity. During the weekend, a group of suspected DRC nationals entered the Ugandan side of the border, backed by their country's police from Mahagi territory, and erected a barricade on the Padia Congo road. A similar incident happened 5 years ago in a nearby Asina when the DRC civilians again attempted to unilaterally extend the international border 2 kilometers inside of Uganda. There was a soaring of relations between communities on either side of the border until Uganda's army moved in and opened up the barricaded areas. And in Nigeria, the war against insurgents has continued to gather momentum since 2009, with the latest attacks leading to the deaths of 35 fighters of Boko Haram in Nigeria's northeast Borno state. At least 65,000 people have died in the war against terrorists, with more than 2.1 million displaced and critical infrastructure disseminated in Nigeria's northeast, Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa states. The latest assaults were carried out by the Nigerian troops of the 21 Ahmad Brigade, Bama Operation Hadin Kai, and 199 Special Forces Battalion in collaboration with Civilian Joint Task Force. The troops hit the enclaves and camps of Boko Haram terrorists during clearance operations in Sambisa forest, where the terrorists were killed and many others were captured. The troops, led by Brigadier General Victor Onachuku, made the unprecedented incursions into the Boko Haram hideouts in the army's determined efforts to completely eliminate the Boko Haram insurgents hiding along the fringes of the Sambisa forest. Nigeria's Defense Headquarters on April 20th, 2023 reported that its troops had in 2 weeks rescued 468 kidnapped victims and eliminated 54 terrorists in various operations across the northeast, north central, and northwest regions of the country. Still staying with Nigeria, gunmen have reportedly, this is the latest, have reportedly abducted no fewer than 29 villagers in the Kwali Area Council of the Federal Capital Territory of Abuja. The 29, which comprised men, women and children, were abducted in the middle of Tuesday night from Yewuti village, the hometown of the immediate past vice chairman of Kwali Area Council, Alhaji Zubairi Jibrin Yewuti. According to Daily Trust, 2 women, Zainab Umar and Aisha Zubairi, escaped from the abductors while being held in the bush. The gunmen reportedly raided 8 houses and whisked away the residents into the bushes. And we end from Tanzania, I believe. The International Monetary Fund on Monday approved the first review of the Tanzania's 3-year extended credit facility, allowing immediate disbursement of about $153 million in budgetary support. The IMF said in a statement. The international financial lender said Tanzania's economic reform program was progressing well in a challenging global economic environment, but authorities must work to boost domestic revenues while stepping up infrastructural reforms to streamline bureaucracy and combat corruption. Efforts to enhance domestic revenue mobilization and improve spending efficiency would help Tanzania finance priority investment and social spending while safeguarding debt sustainability, she added. The The decision brings total disbursement under the 1.04 billion US dollars loan arrangement approved for Tanzania last year to about 305 million US dollars. The IMF said Tanzania's broad-based growth is believed to be turning the country into one of the fastest growing economies in Africa, while a planned liquefied natural gas LNG project could become its biggest ever industrial investment. And that is the latest news from across the continent of Africa, about 18 minutes past 3 p.m. here in Nairobi. Good morning, good evening. I don't know where you're watching me from. It is good to have you on board. I think the attacks by Boko Haram and these kidnappings and all that, it's a broken record. Unfortunately, it still happens, and also, unfortunately, the lives of the people are the ones which are in danger. At this point, we have all agreed that the government of President Muhammadu Buhari cannot really handle this problem or solve this insecurity issue, and so perhaps the hopes of Nigerians is pegged on the incoming president, President-elect Tinubu, whose election still faces some hurdles. His win was challenged at the court. I think the case is still ongoing and is yet to be determined. But as it is right now, he still remains a president-elect. And because of how the constitution of Nigeria is around these matters, he will be sworn in anyway come May. I don't know if the case will be determined by then, but the plans to swear him in have been ongoing. But in the meantime, President Buhari is still the president, and he doesn't seem to, I don't expect anything much from him, because clearly he's not been able to do much in the last 8 years to address the issue of insecurity in Nigeria. So expecting him to handle this matter right now, I think I will be overly ambitious and unrealistic. I don't think that will happen. So we leave that to the incoming president, and I hope, just like the rest of the Nigerians, that the new president who will be coming does have some plan and perhaps, has a strategy on how they're going to address the issue of insecurity in Nigeria, because this is unacceptable. We cannot be so desensitized that people being kidnapped, strangers just going into a village, a neighborhood, and just picking people from their homes or from their gardens or whatever, it has been normalized, even from churches and schools and all that. This cannot be normal. This cannot be normal. But unfortunately, this has been so normalized. It has happened so much that Nigerians from the rest of the country that perhaps are not experiencing this are so desensitized, and even those who go through this every now and then, it has become like a normal occurrence in Nigeria for reasons I don't know, but I think it's because of even how the government has been handling this matter, which is by doing really nothing at all. We've not seen any beefing up of intelligence. We've not seen any change of our strategy. We've not seen any measures put in place to mitigate or to lessen some of these actions that really have threatened and put the lives of Nigerians on the line. And so I don't think there's any much we can talk about as far as this is concerned. So we'll just have to wait for the incoming administration, if at all they have a plan. And even with that, apparently the Nigerian army killed about 35 Boko Haram just the other day. So they've been killed. And then just after that, some Nigerians, 29 of them were kidnapped from the Federal Capital Territory of Abuja. So it's just too much. Anyway, I brought you the update of what is happening in Sudan. And the foreign nationals have been leaving by air, by sea, by land, as I have explained to you just a bit earlier there. And Sudanese will be left to themselves. And there's been a bit of course, the ceasefire is not really holding, but there's been a bit of some break from that fighting that has allowed a quick evacuation, for the countries who are getting their nationalities out of there. I'm seeing a lot of countries in Africa. I didn't know so many people, different nationalities. I'm surprised because of how Sudan is, and how it has not been the most stablest countries in the recent past. But even with that, it still attracted a huge number of international, other nationalities, foreign nationalities, and majority of these are, Britons. It's interesting. I'd like to know why that is the case, among others, of course. The rest of Africans, a lot of them are students in these universities in Sudan. So they're stuck there, and I was just watching a video of Nigerian students. They're stuck, and they're saying everybody else's country is trying to get them out, but it's only them, that the government is not doing anything or much to get them out. Getting anybody out has been quite a challenge because of this. It's an active war zone, and so even planes landing there, it's very difficult. So normal planes cannot land. Every other person that has gotten the people there, they're using the military aircraft, cargo crafts actually, not your normal passenger, aircraft. So it is a very tense situation, and it's very unsafe. And so I think countries right now are just doing the best they can to ensure they are able to evacuate their nationalities from Sudan. Few of them have been successful so far, but others, like Germany, has completely evacuated its citizens from there. I guess there are not so many of them, but there are a good number, and the rest of them are trying. And those who are able to board the boats and use the sea to safer spaces like Saudi Arabia, and then from there they're able to be airlifted to their homes. That is also happening. And for those who perhaps were closer to the borders, are able to use road transport and head over to countries like Chad, Egypt, Ethiopia, South Sudan. They're able to do that. So it is really a very dicey situation, what is going on there in Sudan. Quite unfortunate, really, quite unfortunate. And this third truce that has gone on, I think this is the fourth one now so far, is still not holding at all. And things are becoming very, very difficult there for the people who are caught up in this chaos in Sudan, with having claimed about 420 people have so far died, I think over now. And at least 273 are civilians. So I'm assuming the rest are either the military forces or the paramilitary, the RSF, that have died from this war. So I don't know if I don't know who will be able to speak with these generals, and who will be able to bring them to the mediation table, and how this is going to be solved, and what will happen now. And of course, I started by updating you on the status of former President Omar al-Bashir, who the other day we were told he was not to be found in the jail cell where he's been serving time since he was disposed. Remember, he was charged with corruption and money laundering, among other charges, and so he's been serving time. And the military said that he had been removed from jail because he was was not feeling well or something like that. So they took him to a hospital. So the former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir was moved from prison to a military hospital before the outbreak. So this happened before the outbreak. This outbreak, like I've repeated here so many times over, they saw it coming. And I think 2 days before they started fighting each other. The military, I think, gave a warning shot to RSF after RSF took strategic positions across the capital and other towns, and the army warned it and saw this as an act of aggression. And so the war broke out on the 15th of April. So this they saw coming. So before the outbreak of this fighting, they had taken the former President Omar al-Bashir to a military hospital. Bashir, of course, came to power through a coup in 1989, and he ruled Sudan up to 2019, about 30 years. And then he was toppled by the coming together of these two generals, Hamdan Dagalo, and the leader of the army there, al-Burhan, okay? And so the army said in a statement that Bashir and a number of others had been moved from the Kober prison, that is like the maximum prison near capital Khartoum, to a military hospital under police custody. And there seemed to be a prison outbreak, because this story also, a prison outbreak. This story also is so very multifaceted. So you can clearly see this was a plan from either side, either the paramilitary or the military. So removing former President Omar al-Bashir from Kober prison, and then there's also one key figure, also Harun, that was charged with Omar al-Bashir. Both Bashir and Harun were wanted by the International Criminal Court. He was seen talking, I think he recorded a video, something, saying he is free. So how he was released, nobody knows, among other prisoners that have been serving time. And I think most of them were working under President Omar al-Bashir. And RSF has accused the army before of wanting to reinstate back the generals and the people who had worked under President Omar al-Bashir, and wanted to bring these old guards back and reinstate them back to to their key positions in the government. And that is something that RSF was not keen in having, did not want. Hemedi, on his part, did not want that. So that also was a bone of contention between a couple of issues that these two leaders in the military were not in agreement, could not see eye to eye about. So not just these two, former President Omar al-Bashir that left prison, but also other prisoners, and majority of them were part of the administration of former President Omar al-Bashir. So obviously, we can conclude that either one of the camps has released these prisoners, and that happened after the release of Omar al-Bashir. So I don't know what is going on. Of course, also that has to do with other. It's very difficult to know. It's very difficult right now to even get to really understand why is it that they felt they should do this. But I think he is at the center, former president, he is at the center of some of the things that are happening in Sudan. He created this RSF in 2003. And after that, instead of, they fought in the Darfur War, he used them, the Wa militia initially, to fight the different militias, the rebel groups that were fighting the government in Darfur. And after that conflict was over, he started using them. Omar al-Bashir started using them as a means of income as well, because they were mercenaries for hire, and he could hire these Janjaweed to go fight in Yemen, in Syria, and in other areas, and that became a means of income. They became a source of income for that administration. Okay, then after that, they changed their name to RSF, from Janjaweed to RSF. So they have been very instrumental, and they have been very part and parcel of the leadership of Sudan. So is the army, and they all have very huge interest in the running and the economy of Sudan. So I think it's a broken record. We've said that here too many times, because of the high stakes and interest that the army has and holds in Sudan. It will be very difficult for them to give way to civilian rule. And also there are countries that have been alleged or accused of supporting either side of the conflict, like Egypt and like UAE and these countries in the Gulf, who were not happy with the removal of Omar al-Bashir. And some of them, after it was clear that Bashir was going to be removed, turned around and actually supported the protesters and funded the protest to remove Bashir. So they shifted positions very quickly. But the reason why they are not very keen on having a civilian rule is because they see that this will set a precedence, and that worries countries like Egypt, where we know we have seen some uprising before that removed Hosni Mubarak and all that. And that has made the current president al-Sisi be very good friends with Haftar, because even in Libya, the reason why they're supporting Haftar is because they feel Haftar is fighting this other government that is under the Muslim Brotherhood or something like that. So it's a whole politics of whatnot, and it's just a lot going on there in Sudan, and a lot of proxy wars being fought that has now has become a melting point, and has worked in instigating this conflict further. A lot of interest are represented in this conflict, and so ICC is also part of that, and many other factors. And so they're here. Now they're fighting, and I think Bashir is a very important figure, and I think either side, whoever who has him, the military says they have him safe in the military hospital. I think it's important that they keep him. It's important that they keep him, and I don't know what that will do for them, but I think it's important that they ensure that he is safe and that he does not find his way to the ICC, I guess. I don't know. But they have him in custody. So we'll see. We'll see. These countries in the Gulf, they don't want a civilian role in Sudan, because that might, according to some sources and according to analysts, that might encourage perhaps more uprisings and more protests in those countries, and they can't deal with. So they cannot be supportive of a civilian government. So they're out here double speaking and thinking they're supporting the progress, they're supporting the transition, when in real sense they are working against that, because that will not work for their interest. And they've been working for a long time with the military in gaining from the mineral resources and other things that they have been gaining from Sudan. And so if a civilian government comes into Sudan, that might upset the status quo, and that is something that they're not willing, because they're gaining too much from Sudan, and that is something that they're not willing to give up. And so that is just part of the geopolitical economic politics that you see at play here, and they're just looking out for their own interest. So that civilian transition will still remain a mirage. That deadline they had given last year in December, remember they added another extra 2 years, so hopefully they had said up to next year, 2024. And with this new outbreak of this conflict, there's no telling how long it will go on, until when. But also, obviously, I expect that deadline to be pushed forward. I don't hope that they will respect it. I didn't think they will respect it anyway. I was not expecting that. All signs and how they've been acting, they're not really interested in respecting some of these agreements that they're even making between them. Then they're not respecting. So I don't expect them to respect that deadline for 2024 to allow for transition to civilian rule, because civilian rule is something that they're not keen on having there in Sudan. So as the situation continues to develop, our job is to keep letting you know what is happening there in Sudan and elsewhere, of course, across the continent of Africa. I want to thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.